So now I would like to start this session entitled Nature as a Partner, Implementing Nature-Based Solution Globally. This session is convened by NowNet, Northern Water Network, which consists of 7 countries in Europe, Japan, and Republic of Korea. The NowNet is a network of these members, together with World Water Council and Global Water Partnerships, to exchange experience and good practice to address water challenge, interacting with multi-stakeholders. We NowNet member is continuously focused on the nature-based solution topic since last year. Then this webinar is a continuous discussion, particularly focused on the urban context in Europe and Japan and the Korea. As you can see, these days, heavy rain and storm recently caused severe damage in various cities in Europe, in addition to our Asian countries due to climate change. We NowNet members therefore can see the importance of learning from other countries, not only from one region, but also from other regions, and their urban setting, and how they are preparing for and managing this kind of extreme event, and also as a flood risk management appropriately. So today, our webinar will discuss the pathway and lesson from applying the nature-based solution into existing urban landscape for flood management in Denmark, Finland, Netherlands, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. The speaker will share the application methodology and institutional arrangement and so on, compared to do nothing or gray infrastructure setting, and then how they are also valuing ecosystem, water environment, and so on. Then speaker will discuss whether and how different background of the country or civil society setting will influence the promotion of the nature-based solution to address the risk of flood risk management in urban context. So today we have 5 speakers from Denmark, Finland, Netherlands, Japan, and also Korea. Now, then we will move on to the panel discussion after their presentation. So now I would like to invite Dr. Peter Derfur, Senior Scientist, Geological Survey of Denmark and Greenland, Department of Hydrology. So Peter, floor is for yours.
Thank you, Yumiko. I'll do my best to keep it short. Yes, thank you. Yes, this is will be my presentation for the on nature insurance values of ecosystems. And next, please. Next slide, please. Yes, it will help us to understand how avoided damage and urban planning can help us to value the natural assurance schemes. Yes, please. Next. This is the principle, and I will build this presentation on the results of the NIAD projects on valuation of insurance schemes. You can see here that by implementing nature-based solutions, you will decrease the water risk, and by doing so, you will increase the co-benefits and the avoided damages by decreasing the water risks. Will then increase the co-benefits. I will explain this in the later slide. Next, please. So I will illustrate this by the case of Copenhagen. There were different other cases in this project in which a total cost-benefit analysis was performed, but in this presentation, I will focus on avoided damage as a primary benefit for Copenhagen. Next slide, please. You can see there are multiple challenges in Copenhagen. Cloudburst is one of them, and another problem increasingly important in Copenhagen, but also in other cities in Europe, is the rising groundwater level, which is a major challenge and will unmitigated cause a lot of damage to underground built environment. Next slide, please. Here you can see how the weather patterns are changing over time. There will be more precipitation. The precipitation will be more intense and more frequent, and that is posing a big problem. And here, nature-based solutions can play a role. Next slide, please. You can see here for Copenhagen, sea level rise and also increased rain is a increasing problem, and the sea level rise will at some point in time become more important. And also the cascading effects. So the sea level rise and rain together will pose a major problem. Next slide, please. In Copenhagen, there have been a climate adaptation plan, which is compulsory for all cities in Denmark. And and in 2011, we had a major cloudburst event, which triggered a cloudburst management plan. And from that time on, things went very quickly. So this cloudburst management plan was implemented in the city, and a lot of green solutions emerged from this. And for each year, other projects, green solution and nature-based solutions projects are implemented. Next slide, please. Already socioeconomic data was evaluated long before this cloudburst event, and green solutions were valued, and the NIAD projects from I'll send you a link later, is providing added value with respect to avoided damage for groundwater flooding and co-benefits. So the rising groundwater is causing this problem, and this can be mitigated by using NBS. Next slide, please. This is a hydrological modeling approach we used, a nested approach. So we not only look at the city itself, but also how it is nested into in a larger catchment, which is important. So you take into account what's happening outside the city as well, because this has major implications for the city itself. Next slide, please. This is how this was implemented. So you can see on the right side the urban river, and on the left side you can see the part of the city where this was implemented. A motorway ramp is currently considered to be removed. This is not yet implemented or not yet approved, but the urban river will then have more space, more room, and so this will require major construction work, of course, but this was the scenario we used in NIAD for the Copenhagen case. Next slide, please. You can see the principle of how we do that. So we had the model on the left side. You can see on the right side the housing, so without NBS and with NBS. So if you do not apply nature-based solutions, which in this case is the restored urban river, then the groundwater level will rise and will cause damage to underground built environment, especially cellars. So what we did was we calculated the difference with and without nature-based solutions, and then we used the data provided by insurance company to actually value what is the avoided damage if you apply this urban river nature-based solution. Next slide, please. Here you can see one of the results of this modeling exercise. So you see the dark blue areas is where the the groundwater level will rise the most, and so will cause most damage. And so this is then combined with the insurance data from, as you can see on the next slide. You can see, and of course, this in the title, it should be 2006, not 16. So this is the aggregated insured damage at the property level for this period from 2006 until 2012, and this was reported to the insurance companies, and so we used these data in combination with the model data to find the value of avoided damage if you use the NBS. Next slide, please. So here you can see how this works. So the insurance data provided, so the insurance companies are important as data providers. We have the hydrological modeling on the right side, and if you combine these two, then avoided damage is calculated as a result of applying the nature-based solution. Next slide, please. So key messages from this, and this was done more in so the life cycle cost and other cost benefits analysis were done in other cities, but in this case, as I said, we focused on the avoided damage. So NBS we saw can represent cost-effective alternatives. Hybrid solutions are often needed because even though green solutions can help, still, if you have these cloudburst events, still pipe solutions and so gray solutions will be needed. So what an important outcome of the project and for Copenhagen and also for other cities was that the co-benefits, so the co-benefits in like increased greening, increased public health, and making the city more attractive will exceed actually the value of avoided damage. So this makes an important business case for nature-based solutions. So it can be economically very efficient if you also include these co-benefits. So if you not only look at what is avoided damage, but also look at how otherwise NBS are contributing to a city. This has a strong implication, of course, for the funding strategy. There's of course NBS take space, and so less space can be used for instance, businesses and so on. And so these represent opportunity costs which you need to take into account if you do a realistic CBA. So sharing of data on insured damage is very useful, and in the Copenhagen case, data was shared from an insurance company in order for us to make this calculation and assessment. And so insurance companies, we think, will increasingly play a large role in implementing and financing NBS. Next slide, please. So aggregated data, as I showed, that the aggregated data was on the property level, but in order to make it more useful, then data or damage data caused by surface flooding and by groundwater flooding, for instance, should be disaggregated in order to make it even more useful and also to improve damage functions we use. So damage functions, if you have this aggregated data, will help us to develop more realistic damage functions. And of course, this all implies privacy. So the data must be anonymous in order to be used. So GDPR regulations are maintained. Next, please. And this is my presentation, and I will share the link later in the chat box, so you can see more on this project. Thank you.
So Peter, thank you so much for introducing the Denmark, particularly Copenhagen case. Now, I think next presenter is supposed to be Mr. Antti from Finland, but he has a little bit technical issue because he's a government official. Then he had a difficulty to enter Zoom account. So now if Auntie is not here, I would like to move on to the presentation from Netherlands first. Then I will call to Mr. Auntie in the last presenter of this session. So now I would like to invite Professor Chris J.F.M. Bergen. He is a professor at the Water Engineering Department of IG Delft. He will talk about the NBS, a panacea for urban water challenging experience from Asia and Europe. So Peter, would you please present yourself? Thank you so much. Sorry, not Peter, sorry for Professor Chris. Floor is for yours.
Thank you, Yumiko. Thank you for the nice introduction and for the excellent organization of this session. And I also want to thank the Netherlands Water Partnership for inviting me. Can you please upload the presentation? Thank you. Yeah, my presentation will be about nature-based solutions, of course, but I also would like to address, you can say, the experiences we gained from a project with China and Europe, the Chinese-European Water Partnership, where cities from China and cities from Europe are working together on water-sensitive cities, sponge cities, and one important component of these sponge city or water sensitivity concepts are nature-based solutions. So I would like to share you some first findings. And yeah, my title is Nature-Based Solutions, a Panacea for Urban Water Challenges. We really feel that nature-based solutions has multiple benefits and really has to be very much advocated in cities to become more resilient and become more livable spaces. And of course, the challenges is how to get that done, because what we see in Europe is that we are still having very serious constraints in implementing nature-based solutions. We see that we have projects which are often at a very small scale. They are very fragmented into cities, and they do not have that you can say that overall impact on a city scale that we would like to see. So there's an urgent need for upscaling, for mainstreaming nature-based solutions in city transformation. Next slide, please. Now the key issue, and Peter van der Keur already mentioned that, and I was really happy with his presentation, where he also put a lot of emphasis on the co-benefits, particularly those from prevented damage. I think that is a very interesting co-benefit, which we did not really consider yet in our Chinese-European water project. But the challenge is still how to value all those benefits. And it is about livability, it is about resiliency, but it's also about lowering the cost. And I will come back to that later. But the big issue is, of course, how to value those. And when we have valued those, then we need to have the beneficiaries who are well willing to pay for that. And that is another challenge. And if we talk about prevented damage, which represents a value, these damages are often uncertain and remote. And the question is, of course, how to incentivize the beneficiaries to really pay for that. And I like very much the insurance industry, as mentioned by Peter, who could step in and play a role in that. But when we have, you can say an understanding about the valuing of nature-based solutions, then the question is, of course, how to design those systems. And particularly when we want to complement, say, gray infrastructure with green infrastructure, how to design those hybrid systems. But there are also other questions about maintenance, their long-term behavior. We have still a very short track record. We do not have a full understanding how those systems are behaving on the longer term. Now, in the Netherlands, we have nature-based solutions implemented more than 20 years ago. And we are now collecting the data, how those systems are performing, the hydrological performance of those systems. And we see, of course, that these systems changes over time. There's clogging, there's all sorts of, you can say, impact on the physical properties of those systems. So there is maintenance needed. So that is an important issue, which is still not really fully addressed. And then we have the extreme events, which is particularly now relevant as we have seen those extreme events in many cities over the past 2 months. And the question is, of course, what is the contribution of nature-based solutions to mitigate the impacts of extreme events? Next slide, please. Now, I will quickly go through my slides because I have only a few minutes, but this is a snapshot of the Chinese-European project I just referred to. We have the city of Chengde from China on board. We have Beijing, we have Turku from Finland, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and Gothenburg. And all these cities are collaborating and exchanging information and experiences about the Response City concept. Next slide, please. Now, what we see in those countries, in these cities, they have a combination of measures. We have, on the one hand, the traditional gray system, and that traditional gray system is now being complemented with green systems, the LID or nature-based solutions, and yeah, they are really contributing to the infiltration. They are improving the infiltration capacity of the system. They can retain water, but they can also purify water. So there is, you can say, there are additional benefits. But when we talk about extreme events, they are not really, you can say, designed to handle those extreme events. For these type of events, we have large-scale facilities like storage tanks and large drainage systems. Next slide, please. Now, when we look at the typical layout of a city, then this picture gives a flavor. We have a lot of gray infrastructure because the engineers in that time were very much on these gray infrastructural systems, and they believed that in that time they could really design these systems based on predictions and clear standards. Now, these cities, as we see now, have challenges to deal with water. There is more urbanization, more densification in those cities, and those systems are not really fulfilling any longer. Next slide, please. So we want to add green to those systems. That can be an addition or a substitution. Of course, we need to understand the overall performance of those systems, which is rather challenging. Of course, we have the models in place and the tools in place, but that is not the complete picture. Next slide, please. Now, what is the result when we have those individual projects and we can model these individual projects quite well? How is the system as a whole performing? How do all those projects together perform and influence the behavior of the city? Now, we have learned from Peter van de Keur that Copenhagen has that holistic model that they can really assess how the city is performing when the green measures are implemented. And these measures are implemented to reduce or to increase the volume capture ratio, to stimulate infiltration, but also to reduce the sewage overflow and nutrient emissions. Next slide, please. Now, that means that a raft of measures will be implemented. You can see them on the left side. Next slide, please. And when we look at the cost, and this is an example of a typical project in the US, where there is, you can say, a lot of experience in upgrading cities by adding green to gray. And what we see there is, on the first place, there is a reduced infrastructure capital cost. That means that adding green to gray is less expensive than replacing gray and upgrading gray. So that is one part we can use in the arguments to advocate green. But of course, there are additional benefits from energy. When we talk about pumps, we have additional benefits when we talk about temperature. We have different benefits when we talk about all sorts of benefits which relates to the quality of life in cities. Now, these can be captured and these can be expressed in annual benefits, as you can see here. So you can say there is a clear incentive, financial incentive to promote nature-based solutions. Next slide, please. However, what we see is that these benefits needs to be valued. These needs to be, in a sense, there needs to be stakeholders involved to get that valuation done. And of course, we need to identify the beneficiaries who will actually pay for it. Next slide, please. Now, what we see in Europe that
Professor Chris, are you going for wrap up?
Yes, I'm almost finished. That one of the barriers is what we see is that the local government is traditional in the driving seat for urban infrastructure, and that also means that public investments into sustainable urban infrastructure often lags behind in the context of rapid urbanization. So what we see is that the public authorities are responsible for implementing green, and that also means that the private sector is still very limited on board. Next slide, please. Now, when we go for China, China has a very top-down approach. There's a huge incentive to implement and roll out the Smart City program. There's a need to get additional funding from the private sector, and still there are, you can say, constraints to involve the private sector in that. Last slide, please. Now, what we can see, there are two dimensions to really get the uptake of nature-based solutions really realized. On the one hand, we need to capture the multiple benefits, and on the other hand, we need to involve the stakeholders, particularly the private sector, to get it financed. So thank you very much for your attention. Yumiko, I give the floor to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for Chris for your informative, presentation, comparing with, case of EU and also the China. That is very, very helpful for our discussion in panel discussion. So now I would like to invite Dr. Keigo Nakamura. He is a director of River Restoration Team and Aqua Restoration Research Center, which is a Public Works Research Institute in Japan. He will also introduce about the case of the NBS or green infrastructure, catchment scale flood management or river restoration. So Dr. Keigo Nakamura, floor is for yours.
Okay, thank you, Yumiko, and thank you for inviting this great opportunity. Okay. I am Keigo Nakamura and working at the Public Works Research Institute. In Japan, nature-based solution is still not a common word. So instead of that, the idea green infrastructure is getting popular. So today, I will briefly introduce how green infrastructure has been used for catchment scale flood management in the urban area. In recent years, major floods have occurred almost every year. The 2018 flood in Western Japan killed more than 200 people, and 2019, 2019 huge Eastern Japan typhoon caused economic damage of 2.1 trillion yen, the highest in history. So in response to such a serious damage, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism has launched new initiatives called the Catchment Scale Flood Management in 2020. And the green infrastructure is a key concept for climate change and severe floods. A similar concept to catchment scale flood management was implemented in the 1980s in response to urbanization under the term comprehensive flood control. So in the Tsurumi River Basin, comprehensive flood control measures were implemented in the basin, including the construction of the Tsurumi River multi-purpose retarding basin and the thousands of the retarding basin. During the East Japan typhoon in 2019, about 3.7 million cubic meter was stored in these facilities, And it is estimated the water level of Natsumi River was reduced by about 0.7 meters. So in this case, more than 5,000 small retarding basins in the watershed substantially worked for saving the big city in the downstream, though it takes a long time. So this slide will introduce the status of green infrastructure in Japan. In Japan, since the Great Eastern Japan earthquake in 2011, green infrastructure is attracting attention as a resilient infrastructure that make use of nature. And catchment scale flood management in 2020 expands comprehensive flood control from urban to rural area and adapts a green infrastructure approach. And additionally, green infrastructure public-private partnership platform was established by ministry in March 2020 to accelerate the implementation of green infrastructures and to conduct surveys and research on green infrastructure technologies. Japan's green infrastructures has been practically implemented as river restoration for more than 30 years. So now it is necessary to link the technologies developed in river restoration to watershed restoration. Also, the use of the green infrastructures in urban development, such as infiltration and storage, is also increasing now. And the case of Yokohama City is a good example of the city that is comprehensively promoting green infrastructures in its urban areas. So Yokohama City has declared the use of green infrastructures in its various plans, including the SDGs Future City Plan. And to promote a green infrastructure across sectors, Yokohama also established a new section called the Environmental Creation Bureau, which integrates environmental conservation policies, including sewage, river projects, greenery and agricultural projects, and the global warming countermeasures. So to promote the disaster prevention and mitigation by storing infiltrating rainwater throughout the river basin, they install, for example, rain garden in the park and the rainwater infiltration system to prevent flooding and regenerate the water cycle, and also preserve large tracts of farmland to help control rainwater runoff during heavy rains. Finally, I will explain the availability and challenges for green infrastructures in Japan. First, availabilities. In Japan, now more and more GIS data is becoming available as open data. And as for natural information, environmental DNA is beginning to be used for biological surveys, and available ecological information is expected to increase. And in addition, three-dimensional data is becoming available in many cities, including river geomorphology. So these data will promote the digital twin of the cities, and it enables integrated and optimized flood management. Next, challenges. So one challenge is to assess the multifunctionalities of green infrastructures. I believe this is the same challenge in many countries. And the next is the use of diversified fundings. In the past, the infrastructure development in Japan was mainly funded by public funds, but the green infrastructure projects are now being funded by a variety of sources, including green bonds. And lastly, as is the case in all countries, cooperation among various departments is very, very important. So one good way to solve this problem is to reorganize the departments to be more suitable for green infrastructures, as Yokohama City has already done. Okay, this is all for my talk, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for Dr. Nakamura introducing Japanese case, including the opportunity and challenge to apply for the nature-based solution in urban context. Next, I would like to invite Professor Lee Hyun Kim, Civil and Environmental Engineering Department of Konju National University from the Republic of Korea. So Professor Lee Hyun Kim, floor is for yours.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for one introduction of me. Hello, yeah, my name is Lee Hyun Kim from the Konju National University.
Yes. So Professor, could you speak more close to the mic?
Okay. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, LID and green infrastructure using the MBS mechanisms is widely using terms in Korea. But still, yeah, many LID and green infrastructures are designing with low ecological function. So I want to show today how to increase the ecological function on MBS. Yeah, the distortion of the water circulation by high imperviousness are giving many urban problems. Generally, when the impervious area exceeds 25%, it's well known it is affecting on water pollution and the health of the aquatic ecosystem. So water is, what the most important component in ecosystem by involving on vessel circulation and energy transport. So yeah, this slide shows the transformation of a gray infrastructure into green infrastructure. The gray infrastructure was constructed with a single function, but green infrastructure is creating to give more benefit to the nature and human together. So normally the rainwater is very clean, but the rainwater runoff from the road and parking lot contains nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus. These nutrients are pollutant when discharged into the rivers, but becomes nutrient when they enter the landscaping area. So therefore, it's necessary to design the LID and green infrastructures in consideration of the nutrients. Ecological MBS should be designed by considering restoration of microorganisms, photosynthesis of plants, and filtration and absorption of soil media. Yeah, MBS is the process of creating nature. So this slide shows that ecological MBS design process. Yeah, on the first steps, it's necessary to calculate the amount of runoff to be reduced for water circulation. And then the next step, it is to find the mechanism applicable to MBS by analyzing the physical chemical characteristics of stormwater runoff. The following process is the designing a soil filter media, plant selection, and microbial growth environment inside nature-based solutions. And finally, it's the process of designing a soil amendment or soil liner system in consideration of permeability of the underlying soil. Yeah, this is showing the green infrastructure facilities built to study ecological MBS techniques. It was constructed on our university campus with the funding of Korean Ministry of Environment. The ecological MBS design research has been conducted for the last 15 years in Korea. And then the research result, as based on the research result, we derived LID design guidelines with MBS. So it is showing the examples of applied examples of green infrastructures on Songsan Green City in Korea. All specific land users of this series, including landscaping, road, parking lot, and buildings, the green infrastructures, it is possibly the linking together water and green areas. So we call that one green-blue network. Yeah, it is another example of applied MBS in our country. Yeah, it is showing the examples of green infrastructure facilities reflected in the new city development in Cheonan City. Yeah, also a green-blue network, it was established by connecting green infrastructures. And it is another example. The MBS can be used as a secondary process for small wastewater treatment plants in rural areas. This slide shows an example of treating effluent of wastewater treatment plants in an ecological MBS. The effluent from small wastewater treatment plants, it will be treated again in bio and plant remediation with the MBS. So the final effluent, it can be discharged to the rivers through a pond. Yeah, this is my final conclusions. So to implement MBS on our society, yeah, we have to find the answer for the three questions. So the first one is how can we encourage MBS on our society? So in this case, we need derive numerical ecosystem benefit and cooperation together with people. And then the second question can be how can we apply the ecological MBS design on development process? So in this case, we have to put the ecological MBS design process on our design guidelines, especially by focusing on blue-green network. So all of the most of the stormwater runoff, it can be retained, detained, and infiltrate on our site. And then my final questions can be who will manage for decentralized MBS. So civil participation need for MBS management with governance. So the construction and operation and management cost of MBS will be cheap compared to conventional techniques. This is my final conclusions. So finally, I want to say we cannot beat nature. We need to find the answers in nature. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much for Professor Lee Hyun Kim for your informative and update very latest NBS cases in Republic of Korea. That is very helpful and useful. And finally, I would like to invite Mr. Antti Parjan. He is a leading water management expert, Minister of Agriculture and Forestry of Finland. So Antti, floor is for yours.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Sorry, I'm joining from mobile. I will try to be very quick in order to save some time for the panel discussion. Next slides, please. There are many challenges related to natural flood risk management. There are some of those, in my opinion, most important ones. From the practical point of view, climate change and urbanization increase flood risk, and especially stormwater flood risk and stormwater floods. And uncertainties are much more higher related to nature-based solutions compared to those traditional flood risk management measures. And one challenge is that there's many different benefits, and it's difficult or impossible to measure all of those. And nature-based solutions should be also implemented in a large scale to achieve benefits in extreme events. And from the institutional side, there are many challenges. In my opinion, those are more important ones related to this discussion and today's topic. Often strategies are missing concrete measures and opportunities for organizing funding. And funding is often focused on one purpose, for example, flood risk management or water quality. And it comes from single goal organization because of that. And there might be lack of awareness of different multiple benefits that nature-based solutions create. among the decision makers. There are really many stakeholders and beneficiaries, and that makes the planning process really difficult. And often among the policymakers, short-term goals are prioritized because it might take decades before nature-based solutions benefits are revealed. Next slide, please. Thank you. I conducted a study about nature-based flood risk management in the Baltic Sea region, and based on that, the largest amount of experience in the Baltic Sea region is in Denmark, Poland, Germany, and Sweden. And the finding is that measures have mainly been focused on small-scale runoff water floods. And there should be more large-scale strategies and funding instead of single case studies and projects. The good practices are that early stakeholder participation and extensive cooperation are really important in order to achieve good benefits. And there's need to highlight the diverse benefits, especially in the long term after implementation of the measures. Widespread awareness of different methods and their benefits is also important, as well as monitoring and documentation of the needs of the future projects. Next slide, please. This is just an example that it's really important to have a process in mind when starting the implementation or preparing the implementation of the nature-based flood risk management measures. For example, here, multi-criteria framework was used to make visible a large number of benefits that nature-based solutions can offer. This kind of framework supports structured determining and evaluation of objectives and alternative plans. And next slide, please. And this is also my final slide. I will crystallize my short presentation by saying that highlighting and mainstreaming of multiple benefits of nature-based solutions is still needed. And here we can use different kind of multi-objective frameworks that can significantly improve participatory process in decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Antti, for your presentation, includes the case of Finland and also Baltic Sea region. And also thank you for introducing the LBS assessment which you are doing. So now we would like to move on to the panel discussion. So now I would like to invite Dr. Ann Tenberg. She is a senior advisor at the Swedish Waterhouse, and she is also an adjunct professor at Lund University Center for Sustainable Studies in Sweden. So Anna, would you please coordinate our panel discussion? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Yumiko. And I would also like to invite the audience to post their questions in the chat. I don't see any questions so far. And even if we don't have time to answer all of them now, we will download them and you will receive answers via email later. And we will integrate this also into the summary and recommendations from this session. So while waiting for your comments, I will pose a question myself to the panel. Yeah, I think we heard many interesting examples here of successful MBS, but also about the need to scale up and for enhancing intersectoral collaboration in implementation of MBS and the multiple benefits that they generate. So I would like to hear a little bit from you what kind of institutional innovations you think are needed to scale up MBS and to link urban areas also with surrounding areas, as we know that to control flooding, we need to look at the whole catchment. Maybe I will start with Chris. Can you say something about the kind of institutional innovations you would like to see?
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. Now, I'm very much intrigued by the presentation which was showed about, say, the room for the river concept, which looks a bit on a wider scale how nature-based solutions could impact, say, the flooding and mitigate the flood impacts to cities. And what our experience is with our Room for the River program in the Netherlands, that we have had a central government who was setting out, say, the general framework, and at the local level, with strong engagement of stakeholders, the designs of the interventions were made within the bigger framework. So if you talk about, say, what type of institutional setting is required, I would say that it's very important that there is stakeholder involvement at the lowest scale, and that there is a coordination of the different interventions within the city, done by, say, at a what higher level. So there needs to be a coordination at a higher level, and the actual design, and with strong engagement of the stakeholder at the lowest level, at the project level, as much as possible. So that would be my first suggestion to this. Anna.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think I will pass on the same question to Peter, and here, how you have dealt with this in Copenhagen.
Yes, thank you, Anna. And as I showed in my slides, climate adaptation, greening of the city as a result of problems with cloudburst events have been in Copenhagen for some time, and also in other cities in Denmark. And what I tried to show in my presentation was making the case of how you can finance all of this, and how you can use the data from insurance companies, which was a main focus in this project I represented. And I think it's very important to make this case, and also to develop business models. You need to upscale, and you need to have many stakeholders on board. You need to show that how this can be financed. This is a recurring issue anywhere. And so it is important to have stakeholders on board. And I did not show this in my slides, because we also had many workshops where we try to identify NBS and come with solutions and ideas about financing. But I mean the main point of my presentation was to develop these business models, and for doing this you need to do a cost-benefit analysis, and you need to show what are the co-benefits you generate, and how are they valued. And as I said, co-benefits, the value of co-benefits, so greening the cities, public health, and so on, is often exceeding the primary benefits of avoiding damage as a result of flooding, surface flooding, and in our case also groundwater flooding. So this is a major point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have time for one more question. We have also heard that there is a need to involve the private sector and find innovative financing solution. And I heard that in Japan, you are using green bonds. So perhaps Keigo Nakamura, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think yes. Green bonds just recently started in Japan, and it has a great potential to progress the green infrastructures. And nowadays, there are many discussions between engineers and finance sectors. So, and this kind of a discussion is going on in, I can say, central government and also local government. So I think that this kind of collaboration is very interesting, and important trend for implementing the nature-based solution. Thank you.
Okay, Yumiko, do you want me to wrap up, or do we have time for one more question?
Could you ask one more question?
Yeah. Maybe then I will ask Lee Yoon Kim from Korea also about how you finance the scaling up of MBS in Korea.
Okay, so our government, we made the legal base, legal framework for application of MBS, and then the local government, like the city hall, they are making the ordinance for MBS on the private sector. Mostly in the case of the public sector, it's already we made already the guidelines using the mechanism of MBS, but still we need more the legal basis for private sector. But in the case of for private sector, so the government cannot support the financial to the citizens. But legally, we are trying to focusing on the pollution problems. By focusing on the pollution problems, we are urging the private to implementing the MBS on private sector. That's our situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then maybe I will wrap up this session, or what you say, Yumiko?
Yes, please wrap up.
Yeah. So thank you to all speakers and panelists for sharing your very useful and relevant experiences on implementing MBS in Europe and Asia. And we can see a number of issues coming out here that are extremely important to consider for the scaling up and successful implementation of MBS. First of all, we have heard from almost all the speakers about the importance of intersectoral collaboration and institutional mainstreaming, and to capture the multiple benefits of MBS. Also, we heard about the need for data sharing and modeling, use of hydrological models, and combining this also with insurance data. And we need also to look beyond the urban area to address the drivers of flood damage and improve the ecological functions of MBS and consider ecological flows. So I think that these are some of the factors that we can look at to scale up MBS also to new cities. And we need to ensure that there is data sharing and collaboration, sharing of experiences, and NoNet is a very useful network for that. So Yumiko, I think I will stop there and hand over to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much for nicely, wrapping up, our panel discussion. Combining every speakers key point. I also thank you for all presenters to join this session. I also thank you to audience to listening to this our session. And we couldn't respond to all questions we received through chat box chat possible. So we will try to do our best to respond to all your questions through this possible box. But if you have any questions specifically, we can also very welcome to receive email from you. So and next, actually, this session is not enough to discuss a lot of situation in Europe and Asian countries. So we will, reorganize nature-based solutions in urban context together with other our NowNet members, hopefully in September. So I really would like to invite you, or I would like to invite all audience of today's session to discuss more intensively in our next opportunity of NowNet member. So thank you so much for listening to our webinar, and we are looking forward to discussing more in our next NowNet webinar series about the nature-based solution to apply for the flood risk management in urban context. Thank you so much for your participation. See you next time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Yumika, for organizing
Thank
this.
you.
Thank you, Auntie, for your
you.
participation.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Yunjin. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.